Why are humans so obsessed with technology?
It's great when people get excited about innovation, right? And advancement and everything. But I do think that we Homo sapiens have a little bit of a humility problem sometimes, like that humility goes a long way. And in fact, when do you learn the best? It's when you're humble, right? You sometimes avoid your ability to learn if you're not opening your eyes and you're just thinking you have all the solutions all the time. We tend to think about nature as something that's separate from humans when try and create a planet that doesn't have all of the non-human stuff on it and see how far that goes.
Welcome to Nature Is, where we brainstorm, share innovative ideas, and have conversations to stir our spirits and elevate our actions for a better world. Well, hello and welcome to Nature Is. Today we have the pleasure of welcoming Lucy Almond, the Chair of Nature for Climate, and Peter Ellis, the Global Director of Natural Climate Solutions Science at the Nature Conservancy. Thank you both for joining us today. It's such a pleasure to have you.
Pleasure. Nice to be here.
Pleasure to be here.
We have London and Maine represented here respectively. And on a really exciting topic, which is the Naturebase platform and how it's helping to mitigate carbon through natural climate solutions. And so before we go into the platform, Peter, maybe we can start with you and have you help us to understand the difference between natural climate solutions and nature-based solutions, so we have a good foundation going into the discussion.
Sure, yeah. This is a confusion for a lot of people, and I understand why. Nature-based solutions is a very expansive term. It refers to anything that we as humans do in concert with nature to address our societal challenges and problems. So it could range anything from, protecting mangroves to prevent storm surges, to planting trees to improve water runoff. Natural climate solutions refers to that subset of nature-based solutions that's addressing the climate problem in particular.
Well, that's really helpful. And I'll switch over to Lucy and then we'll come back to you for more elaboration, Peter. But Lucy, I know you wear many hats professionally, and today we're focused on the Nature for Climate collaboration and the way that you've worked with scientists and developers like Peter, and more broadly, the Nature Conservancy to bring this platform to life. So can you tell us how the Naturebase initiative started and its goals, who it's intended for, and why this is needed in the world?
Nature for Climate actually grew out of a science paper that Peter was involved in back in 2015, where we were working together. Actually, the first COP I ever went to was the Paris COP, where nature was very much on the outside of the conversation. And we were busy trying to make the case for natural climate solutions, which can provide a third of the climate solution. And so we got 5 of the big environmental NGOs back then to agree to work together on communications specifically. So being able to speak with one voice to the climate community about the critical role that nature plays. And so in 2017, we launched the Nature for Climate initiative, which was bringing those environmental NGOs together. Before that was a lot of mixed messaging, really, and debate about the scale of nature's role in climate mitigation, which meant that lots of governments and private sector organizations didn't really focus on the role that nature could play because there was a lot of uncertainty around that. And since then, Nature for Climate's grown to 27 partners and counting. And we have one objective, which is to build trust in nature-based solutions and accelerate implementation. And Naturebase is our online interactive platform, which really grew out of the original science, which was the Natural Climate Solutions Atlas that we originally had on the website. I can come back and talk a little bit more about the types of activities that Nature for Climate does. But really, that's kind of where Naturebase sits at the heart of it's the science that underpins our whole movement building strategy.
Oh, well, thank you, Lucy. And I think that reference back to the COP is such a useful indicator as to how much has changed in a relatively short period of time, really thanks to the work that both of you are doing to elevate nature as a solution to the broader climate crisis. But on your last point, Lucy, and shifting back to you, Peter, can you tell us how the Naturebase platform works, just to give us an understanding of the data that you've integrated as you've worked to fill that gap and some of the references to the underpinning of the science that Lucy mentioned?
Yeah, sure. So I've always been a privilege to work with Lucy. We've been working on natural climate solutions for almost 10 years now together, Lucy. And she's right that it started from, in about 2015, we started trying to answer this question: how much do we think nature could help contribute to the greatest single challenge civilization has faced? And we surprised ourselves with the fact that about a third of the work we need to do in the near term to avoid climate catastrophe comes from these interventions. We put together the best scientists and sort of had a very rapid assessment of the available information to come up with that 11 gigatons or third. And it was a great exercise. Those numbers are now entrenched in the International Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. So that science is going forward, but they're just numbers, right? Like, it doesn't tell people what to do where. And I think in this climate crisis right now, people want to know how to be part of a movement that produces real solutions. And so for us, it was really important that you didn't just say, hey, there's a problem, nature can help. We also wanted to say, here's what you can do. Here's where you can do it. Here's ways you might be able to get some money for it. Here are some of the policy constraints you want to think about. And so that's the question we tried to answer with Naturebase, was really making it regionally and locally relevant to the people on the ground who have the agency to make changes in how we steward land. That's all natural climate solutions are, is changes in land stewardship that store more carbon on the landscape explicitly. So it was hard work, actually. We found out that when you actually can't get away with hand waving at these things at global scales, and you have to be very precise and pin them down, the science gets harder to do. And you have to ask yourself really practical questions of like, can you allow agroforestry and reforestation in the same place? And what ways do they interact? And what influence does cost and feasibility have on all of these sorts of things? So we're proud that we were able to assemble that information, which is really forward-looking. It's not the way the traditional science has been evolved within the UN type framework is really important. Like, let's make sure we have monitoring systems in place that prove these things out as we do our work over time. Super important, but we saw a gap in that what people need is a little bit of a lighting of the pathway forward so they can have concrete ideas of the interventions they can get going on the ground and some information that we need to build on this more as we build the movement about how you actually get started in doing that work. So Naturebase, which I encourage everyone to go online and check out now, naturebase.org, and send us feedback because we want it to be useful to people for actually making decisions. We're still in a beta status with this. It's still improving. We want to make it better. So please send us feedback, but it's intended for policy and decision makers, corporate supply chain managers, Indigenous peoples and local communities who, by the way, probably steward a large portion of the NCS opportunity, farmers, loggers, the people who are closest to the decisions that actually affect how we steward land, provide you with the best available science so you can actually start to understand what portion of your portfolio is going to be the place where you can make the biggest difference and the biggest contribution to the climate movement. That's what we hope to do with Naturebase. And we've got a long way to go. Like, we're trying to build partnerships. There's always room to improve the science. We need a lot more information on the economics of this. But we're pretty excited that when we go to final release this month, we're going to have the best available scientific information at multiple scales for making those decisions.
Well, it's such an inspiring example, and I think that's one of the things that really gravitates people now towards the nature positive movement and thinking about biodiversity, is that it is very palpable compared to the climate crisis, which equally important but a little harder for individuals to relate to. But you rightly point out the challenge, which is the data, and it's very localized, and so the more people interacting, the better. And maybe we can double click on that in a second. But Lucy, you mentioned right before we went into some of the science, the role that the Nature for Climate initially had. Do you want to elaborate on that a little bit more, and some of those partnerships, and how you've thought about the need for a platform like Naturebase?
Yeah, I think when we started having these conversations 10 years ago, and Peter, 10 years, how that goes so quickly. So it was everybody knew that the science was really important. All of the decisions had to be based on science consensus, basically, which is where this sort of natural climate solutions paper came from. But you weren't going to get anywhere if you hadn't brought a whole bunch of other people with you, the economic decision makers, the policy makers within government. So that movement building strategy was allied to the scientific work in quite an unusual way, I think. And TNC, who hosted Nature for Climate, realized that they couldn't do it on their own and that they needed to bring all these other players with them. And so that's why we've been building this sort of inclusive big tent movement. As I say, it started out with a lot of like-minded environmental NGO organizations, but it's now grown to groups that represent obviously UN agencies, private sector organizations, quite a lot of new kind of emerging interest groups, like in the nature tech area. There's the movement itself has really evolved, and we've seen a lot more private sector interest in the last couple of years. And then the type of work we do to help raise the profile of the work that Naturebase and other science-based tools can do is, we do the kind of obvious stuff like hosting collaborative nature zone pavilions and comms campaigns at the regional climate weeks and the UNFCCC COPs. We also bring together certain communities, certain decision makers who are critical to that implementation of nature-based solution, such as the finance sector. So we've created knowledge exchanges and communications with the finance community, who are kind of pioneers in investing in nature-based solutions to help mainstream that approach. We provide guidance to governments. So, for example, our nature-based solutions within the government climate plan, the nationally determined contributions. So we help steer governments, and then we create kind of transparency around the current state of policy and private sector action. So we have things like a nature-based solutions policy tracker or a commitment pledge tracker to help the world understand where we are on this journey to kind of full nature-based solutions implementation.
These are all really helpful examples, I think, that show the power of collaboration, and that the sum of the whole parts can be greater than the whole when you get all of these cross-sector industries and interests working together. So it's a testament to your decades worth of work to that end. And another way I'm thinking about this that might additionally help people to visualize the platform is a sort of map of opportunities. And Peter, maybe you can speak to this from the way the platform works to identify the areas in the world most primed to mitigate carbon through nature-based solutions. Is that a fair way of visualizing what the platform brings to life?
Yes, absolutely. So in that sense of sort of lighting a pathway forward, what it does is puts together the best available information on what we call pathways, right? So pathways are simply groupings of these stewardship activities. So stopping deforestation or avoided forest conversion, that is a natural climate solution pathway. Reforestation is another pathway. So let's pick reforestation, for example. If you are interested in reforestation, which by the way is not just planting trees can plant themselves quite well, and they've evolved to do that. So the easiest way to do reforestation is let forests grow back on their own. if you want to let forests grow back, where would you do that and achieve the largest mitigation potential? So you mitigate climate. Mitigate just means better. You don't mitigate carbon. Carbon is the thing that you lock up. You also, when you mitigate climate, have to worry about other things like albedo and other greenhouse gases, methane, nitrous oxide. We do all that sort of complex, boring stuff for you so that you understand exactly what a reforestation campaign in a jurisdiction would deliver in terms of the overall climate mitigation. That's measured in tons of carbon dioxide equivalent. That's the sort of universal standard for a unit of effective climate mitigation that happens to trade on voluntary carbon markets as well. But that path forward will give you those numbers. And so you can have an estimate of what a carbon project, a reforestation carbon project might look like in a given jurisdiction. You can also get an estimate of how much that same reforestation project would deliver to the country's nationally determined contribution, as Lucy said. But then that doesn't end there, because one of the things we really learned from piloting this is, yeah, climate is really important, urgent thing. But for the people who are actually living in these places and have the opportunity to change the stewardship, they really care about a lot of other stuff too, right? They care about their own water quality. They care about the cooling services that trees provide. They care about access to food resources. So we do include, and we're trying to build this out more, what we call co-benefits, but they're not really co-benefits. Sometimes they're more important than climate to the people that are there. We include some information on the other benefits that are delivered through whatever activity. So if it's reforestation, how much of those benefits do you accrue when you invest in that particular activity in a given place?
Yeah, I think the co-benefit piece is so important for us to remember. And it's one of the aspects of the nature side that I think brings it to life for so many people. A related question, Peter. So if people are looking at intact ecosystems, let's take grasslands in the American West, could they also look at this not necessarily from a restoration perspective, but from a conservation perspective, and understand the broader co-benefits climate mitigation piece that, let's just say, grasslands are providing when they're left intact versus grazed or developed for other land uses?
I'm so glad you asked this, because this is important to articulate. There is a hierarchy in how we conceive of investing in natural climate solutions that's somewhat independent of the mitigation or the climate benefit they provide. There are three types of, I like to think of them all as forms of conservation activities that we can invest in: protection, improved management, or restoration. And we put them in that order for a reason. It makes no sense to plant trees in one portion of a landscape when they're being cut down in another portion. Protection is always the easiest, lowest hanging, cheapest fruit to invest in when you're not always, I shouldn't say always, but tends to be when you're looking at a full conservation portfolio of different NCS activities. And so we tend to want to emphasize that when we think about how we devise a broader portfolio of activities. Yes, absolutely. Before we start thinking about grassland restoration as a natural climate solution, let's make sure we're preventing the spread of unnecessary agriculture into grasslands in that western zone so that we keep those soil intact. It's always easy to keep something you haven't lost yet rather than get it back.
Yeah, no, that's really helpful, because I think the way you've compartmentalized that helps people to understand the difference. And Lucy, just going back to some of your references of stakeholder engagement, maybe you can speak to the piece of engaging local communities and Indigenous peoples and the social component of those stakeholders and the ways that you've seen that play out.
Yeah, and I think, as Peter referenced, a long list of people who should be users of Naturebase, really, for whom Naturebase can help them it's all about helping them make informed decisions, really, in terms of their nature and climate planning and implementation, which is actually especially important right now in this year. I think it's a point worth making because countries are currently in the position of looking at their nationally determined contributions ahead of a deadline next year in 2025. And Naturebase can actually provide the foundation for increased ambition and increased action on if they can implement nature-based solutions within their climate plans. And I think that's the key. Like, we've really got a small window between now and the end of 2025 when governments particularly can use something like Naturebase to help increase their ambition. But specifically for Indigenous peoples and other local communities, Naturebase also, it can play a role in terms of it, it's free. So it grants free, open data to help inform any of the interventions that might be taking place within an Indigenous people's landscape. So it gives them leverage to help make better decisions in partnership with others. It will help them attract direct finance for their invaluable work that they do as stewards of nature. So climate finance is often looking for, the right places to have these kind of partnerships with Indigenous and local communities, and Naturebase can help inform that. But it can also help elevate the voice and the claims and stories that Indigenous people are making. And my colleagues who work in Nature for Climate on the communication side have been doing a lot of work trying to pull out those, complex stories of Indigenous people as stewards of nature, but with the science and the economics kind of layered on top of that. So, for example, this is a really hot topic at the moment, but if Indigenous peoples are deciding to engage on the carbon market side of things, Naturebase can help provide a basis for them for checking the potential of their land for sequestering carbon from the atmosphere, which, might have been a much harder kind of thing for them to do before tools like Naturebase exist. And it also importantly helps provide guidance on what high integrity nature-based solutions actually looks like. And it contains a human rights screener, which they can use to ensure any developer who's looking to partner with them is adhering to the right principles and safeguards, such as free, informed, and prior consent.
So robust and democratized because it's free. What an amazing resource, and to think how far we've come thanks to work like this to enable people to understand this in a way, and also ways I think we're learning from the carbon markets with really putting to the fore high integrity and really robust systems of measurement. And also, I love the link back to the NDCs. I think that's an incredibly pragmatic tie for our policymakers as we move forward with more negotiations. Shifting just a little bit, Peter, maybe you can talk a little bit about how we weave nature and technology together. I think there's some powerful examples here that might be easy to overlook.
Yeah, totally. So it is really exciting to see this phase we're in where human society is developing technology so rapidly and engineering them to face these important environmental and sustainability challenges. But I think the point of nature-based solutions is to say, let's not get too arrogant about our own human ingenuity when nature has been working on these same problems, such as too many greenhouse gases in the atmosphere for literally, millennia and billions of years. The innovation that literally solved toxic levels of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere was called photosynthesis, and that was invented over 1 billion years ago and has been in research and development this entire time. So let's work with that ingenuity and innovation and help through our own human technologies to mobilize it, understand it effectively. We've lost about half of the world's forests. We need to stop doing that and bring them back so that those little solar panels that now in the spring we're seeing pop out on the ends of trees everywhere can actually do their work and store that carbon out of the atmosphere effectively, just like they started to at the advent of life. I want to say a couple things too in reference to your previous question, because I think Lucy answered that really well. But it's actually, when we think about Indigenous peoples and local communities as partners in this endeavor with nature's technology, we have so much to learn that I really think I would like to see us, Lucy, we need to talk more about this, evolve and maybe even kind of restart the nature-based solutions movement in a way that integrates Indigenous peoples and local communities at the forefront of that storytelling and the movement building itself. I mean, I think we're already doing some of that, but there's a lot more we can do. And when we think about Naturebase's role there, it is both really exciting because now, as Lucy said, this is a radically transparent. There is no other platform out there that has the access to the data down to the code itself that we are sharing with the world. So that comes at a cost. We need to be able to maintain that service to the rest of the world. So we're looking for people who want to support that service that we're bringing to the rest of the world. But it's particularly poignant for these Indigenous people and local communities because they're being approached now by people in the carbon market and saying, hey, we realize now you actually have a huge market potential in the land that you steward. Here's a check, sign on the dotted line. And they haven't had any opportunity to negotiate in that process to understand what actually is their agency before they sign on that dotted line. So part of what we want to do with Naturebase is give them that agency so that they can enter into that conversation with the best available information. But it is tough. And so, the flip side is the wrong types of people could use this information to try to exploit people who don't have access to that type of information. So that's why we really wanted to emphasize the use of this human rights tool that Lucy mentioned, which flashes up. It's the first thing you see when you land on Naturebase. You agree to try to adhere to the principles of respecting Indigenous people's own tenure over their land, free, prior, informed consent, self-determination. But that again is just a suggestion. We're just an interactive web platform. We don't have the ability to enforce this. We're all trying to build a somewhat, opportunistic and optimistic way to navigate forward in this challenge without price on carbon and an international regulation scheme. So, but I have faith in humanity, particularly if we start with those people that matter most who are at that forefront. And I think that is those rural communities like Indigenous peoples and local communities to help build that movement from the ground up. And this Naturebase, we hope, gives them the information they need to really do that.
Well, it's a great clarification, Peter, and I think a powerful reminder of going back to the origins and the wisdom that so many of these communities have always had, and that we don't need to look farther than what's been under our nose for a long time. And back to your earlier point, it's interestingly very much a biomimicry principle. And we launched this series with the Biomimicry Institute. And one of the sentences I remember sticking out so much is how we need to quiet human cleverness and just let nature do its work. And so there is a balance between technology and then understanding sometimes that less is more. And Janine Baez, who is the founder and a Montanan, says that it's, a 3.8 billion years of acquired intelligence, and that this is just basic human training for earthlings. So it really distills down, I think, the ways that we need to step back and, to your point, learn from nature. Lucy, I just want to give you a chance if you had a perspective to offer on the nature and technology piece.
I think Peter said it very well. I think what's interesting to me is the nature as technology is one massive component to this that people kind of take. It takes a long time to really understand that and sort of take that inside. I think what has been really interesting to me, having been part of the whole nature tech movement a couple of years ago, is just how much humans love technology as a solution. So, everyone got so excited when we started talking about nature tech, and suddenly all these people who weren't interested in nature and natural climate solutions are like, yeah, I want to be in there, because for whatever reason, and I've done a little bit of home research, Googling, why are humans so obsessed with technology? I mean, in this case, I think it's great and that we can use it. But I think Peter has always been my conscience on this, which is it is nature that's actually more important. It's not the technology for technology's sake. So I have to temper my own excitement about nature tech sometimes. I remember Peter.
Well, I mean, I think it's super excited it's great when people get excited about innovation, right? And advancement and everything. But I do think that we Homo sapiens have a little bit of a humility problem sometimes, like that humility goes a long way. And in fact, when do you learn the best? It's when you're humble, right? You sometimes avoid your ability to learn if you're not opening your eyes and you're just thinking you have all the solutions all the time. So that's one way I think that's important. I try to inject that into this nature tech conversation. But the other is like more philosophical. We tend to think about nature as something that's separate from humans when try and create a planet that doesn't have all of the non-human stuff on it and see how far that goes, right? Like we are, like it or not, embedded and very vulnerable to the global ecosystem, which we are a part of. We are part of nature. Now, we are very important keystone species that do have our hands in a lot of the functioning of many ecosystems around the world, and we need to take that responsibility seriously. But we're not separate from it. And so I would like to reform the idea of nature tech as something that does include both human ingenuity and non-human ingenuity together.
No, it's a good reminder for us all. I think that yes, one, we are nature, and we need to think humbly about looking for these solutions because so many of them are right under our feet. Well, as our time draws to a close, I would love to understand from both of you what's needed in the broader community to help Naturebase expand its positive impact. And Lucy, maybe we'll start with you. Tell us what we can get out there in the world to help you scale.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's two things. One, Naturebase needs more users. It just needs more and more users. It needs governments, private sector, Indigenous peoples, local communities. It needs all of those use cases for it to fill its potential. And then I would say this because I'm a comms person by background, but it needs communication. People need to know about it. It took a long time for everyone to understand that Global Forest Watch was doing what it was doing. It's decades of Global Forest Watch communicating, providing the science, and I think we need to take the same approach with Naturebase.
Excellent. We'll help with that amplification. What about you, Peter?
I think Lucy said it perfectly. I think part of the challenge with our commitment to keeping Naturebase fully open source is that we don't have the sort of communications power that some of these private sector platforms do. And so it has to spread word of mouth a little bit more organically. So that just takes time. But I really believe that the data in there, partly because it's transparent, but also because it's good, will stand the test of time. And as people learn more and more about it, we'll want to use it more. But we just need to get the word out so people know that this is available. We want people using it. That's the first thing. I think the second thing, because this is a public good, we do need support and funding to keep it going so that we can keep it an open source public good. We're entering the end of a cycle of funding right now. And so we would love anyone who is interested in continuing to support to keeping Naturebase open source. Come and talk to us. We'd love to think about ways we could partner together.
And Peter, did you say that a beta was launching soon? Shall we make note of that date as well?
This month, we will be launching our final product. The beta is already out there. So you can go to naturebase.org now and give us feedback. And we still have a little bit of time to try and respond to your feedback to make it better.
Okay. And then June, the full launch, building off of the beta. Perfect.
Now, yeah, in the next few weeks. Yes.
Well, that's exciting. Congratulations. We'll definitely help spread the word because, and you might see some searches now from the Greater Yellowstone ecosystem.
Great.
So always our last question, and we can do this separately, one for each of you, very much grounded in nature. Where are each of you most at home in the natural world? Lucy, we'll start with you.
I mean, with almost perfect comic timing, my dog showed up. I don't know if you could see her, but during this conversation, so my dog is basically my connection to nature because I'm a bit of a newcomer to nature in that I grew up in a kind of fairly urban setting, and my mum's Irish, so I don't really cope with the tropical conditions very well. So my love of nature is very, very parochial, come across as very British. But basically, I'm happiest when I'm walking my dog, Rhubarb, in our local village woodland. So that's when I'm happy, and mostly when it's raining, which I love.
Oh, well, that's perfect. And as a dog owner as well, I can relate to that, and I love the name Rhubarb. Oh, and how about you, Peter?
It's very British of you, Lucy, that you like walking your dog in the rain. But I also love my dog, but I am a huge lover of mountains. I'm privileged enough to work all over the world in cool places like Indonesia, and I lived in Gabon, Africa, and tropical forests hold a special place in my heart, but I cannot beat the amazing, beautiful mountains of northern New England, which I hope to be off hiking as soon as I can clear my meeting schedule and get up there and soak up the beautiful mountain air.
Well, these are both great ecosystems and sources of inspiration. And thank you both for your time, the incredible work that you do in the world. And I think these are both great examples of the unsung heroes that have been toiling away for decades on a topic that has only in the last few years really gained global attention and popularity. So thank you for doing this work for so long to get it to the point where it can start to see the sunshine and the support that it's now beginning to get.
Thank you, Lara, and thanks ever so much for your work as well on this podcast. So thanks for having us.
Wonderful. Well, we look forward to staying in touch and helping to get the word out about Naturebase.
Thank you. Thanks for helping to spread the movement, Lara.